Picture this. You're sitting on a sidewalk with a collection of door handles. No doors, no walls, no house, just handles. You arrange them carefully, study their mechanisms, practice turning them. Other people seem to have working doors, so the problem must be you, right? You're just not trying hard enough. You need more handles. Better handles. Professional grade handles. But this never works because there's no door. There's no door because there's no wall. There's no wall because there's no house. There is no house because they demolished it before you could remember it existed. They told you that having a house is selfish and that if you want to be a good person, you have to give it away. That nobody will ever love you if you have a house. This is what boundary work looks like without subjectivity. You've probably been trying to establish boundaries for years. Reading books, attending therapy, practicing assertiveness. Yet, every time someone violates these supposed boundaries, you're caught off guard. Sometimes you don't even recognize it until hours, days, maybe weeks later. You felt the violation, but couldn't name it. Then comes the shame spiral. Why didn't I say something? Why do I always let this happen? What's wrong with my boundaries? Nothing is wrong with your boundaries. You can't guard the perimeter of something that doesn't exist. And no, it's not your fault. The social conditioning didn't just remove your subjectivity, it replaced it with a feedback loop that makes its own damage look like your failure. It's not just that your subjectivity was destroyed, something else took its place. The systemic programming doesn't leave a void, it fills it. The parasitic program learned to mimic you so perfectly that you can't tell where it ends and you begin. Worse, it convinced you that it is you, and that the real you is something shameful to hide. Remember that tiny voice that sometimes says, "This is bullshit," when you're performing your daily routines. That flash of rage before you suppress it. That moment of clarity before you talk yourself back into compliance. That's not your shadow self or your inner child or your trauma response. That's the actual you shoved under the floorboards while the mind parasite walks around in your skin. When you exist as subject, boundaries happen as naturally as shadows fall from things in light. But they told you your shadow was shameful, that the parts of you blocking the light had to be healed, fixed, purified, so you became transparent and erased yourself. If you can't find your boundaries, there is nothing wrong with you. You've been looking for something that doesn't exist as separate entity. When you exist as object, without center, without field, without axis, no amount of boundary work will create what's missing. Boundaries are like crutches, some artificial accessories that you can never relax and forget about. You can hobble around on them, sure, but when you actually need to hit someone with them, you'll fall, because you were never meant to walk on crutches. You were meant to have legs. Your therapist says, you need to start enforcing your boundaries. And you sit there feeling like an idiot because you have no idea what that even means. The entire concept of boundaries in psychology is a parasitic construct. It's not a tool for healing. It's a simulation of autonomy sold to those whose autonomy has already been destroyed. You're not failing at boundaries. You've been given an impossible task. The therapeutic industry has convinced millions that boundaries are a technique you can learn, a skill you can develop, a line you can draw. But here's the crack in their matrix. Boundaries aren't something you build. They're something that happens when you exist as a subject. Here's another metaphor discovered at 5 a.m. while watching figure skating qualifiers, seeing how some skaters live on ice while others survive through hellish tension. Some skaters have their exes inside them, others are desperately trying to hold a shape that's collapsing. It's pure physics without social masks. This isn't about skill level. It's about whether movement originates from center or from desperate attempt to maintain form. You can't fake center of mass on ice. Physics will expose you instantly. The same is true for psychological boundaries. When you have genuine subjectivity, you don't think about boundaries any more than a figure skater thinks about gravity. It's simply the field within which you move. When you don't have subjectivity, you're constantly calculating, adjusting, failing, and calling it boundary work. The moon doesn't need to be taught where its orbit is. It orbits the Earth because gravity exists. Remove the Earth, and you can manually drag that moon around all you want. You'll sweat, struggle, exhaust yourself, and it still won't be an orbit. It's just forced movement, simulated trajectory. This is exactly what happens when you try to maintain boundaries without a center of gravity, without subjectivity. You're manually dragging your life through space, calculating every distance, monitoring every interaction, exhausting yourself trying to maintain trajectories that should be automatic. When subjectivity exists, when you have an actual center of being, boundaries aren't something you construct. They're the natural orbit of your existence. People and experiences either fall into your gravitational field for intimate connection, maintain stable orbit for sustainable relationships, get flung out by centrifugal force when they're incompatible, or never enter your system at all through natural immunity. You don't decide this through willpower or technique. It happens through physics, through the simple facts of your mass, your density, your presence. Let's map the actual mechanism. Phase 1. Destruction of subjectivity. This happens in early childhood. Don't be selfish, they tell you. Think of others first. Good children don't get angry. You're too sensitive. No one will love you if you're like this. You should be ashamed of yourself. The child learns their internal experience is invalid. Their center of gravity is systematically removed and replaced with external reference points. They become a moon without a planet, desperately seeking something to orbit. Phase 2. Installation of object consciousness. Now you perform for approval. You regulate your emotions for others' comfort. You suppress authentic response. You develop hypervigilance to external demands. The subject becomes an object, a thing to be used, shaped, positioned. But objects don't have boundaries. Your toaster won't tell you that your bread invades its personal space. You couldn't tell your school teacher that shaming you in front of the whole class was a boundary violation. Phase 3. The introduction of boundary work. Here's where the mindfuck reaches its apex. The system that destroyed your subjectivity now sells you techniques for managing its absence. You need better boundaries, they say. Learn to say no. Practice self-care. Set limits. You're taught to consciously maintain what should be unconscious, to think your way into what should be felt. Worse, They teach someone whose survival program is built on external approval to deliberately provoke external disapproval. This is the same system that punished you for anger, shamed you for saying no, and labeled your self-protection as selfishness, now telling you to set boundaries. It's criminalized the very emotions that make boundaries possible, then blamed you for not having them. And if you think therapy also addresses these issues, try to get genuinely angry at the therapist. Many people do feel anger toward their therapist. Frustration, suspicion, even the sense that nothing's working when nothing's working. But instead of expressing it, they suppress it. Because therapy is supposed to help, and you're not supposed to be resistant. The therapy itself makes you an object. Again. Phase 4. The profitable failure loop. Your boundaries don't work because you're not a subject. You blame yourself. Must not be doing it right. You seek more help through therapy, books, workshops. Repeats until bankruptcy. The industry thrives on this failure. Every collapsed boundary sends you back for more treatment. Every violation requires more processing. It's like a wound that never heals because the prescription is deepening the infection. Let's imagine that subjectivity isn't just gravitational, it's also electromagnetic. A genuine subject generates a field with charge. It has resistance and natural immunity to incompatible frequencies. It has conductivity, the capacity to channel compatible energy. And it has voltage, the intensity of presence. When you exist as subject, you're not just a mass in space. You're a living field that actively sorts reality. Some things conduct through you, others meet resistance, others are repelled entirely. This happens automatically below conscious thought, as fundamental as your cells knowing what's food and what's poison. Without subjectivity, you become a pure conductor with no resistance. Everything passes through you. Other people's emotions, expectations, projections, needs. You're not a being, you're a medium, a channel for foreign signals. And they call your exhaustion burnout, as if you just work too hard, when really you've been electrocuted by everyone else's current. When you don't know where you end and others begin, every interaction becomes Minesweeper. You're constantly testing, guessing, waiting for the explosion that tells you you've crossed into dangerous territory. Your boundaries become a collection of arbitrary rules based on past explosions. Don't share personal information because someone used it against you once. Don't accept help because it came with hidden costs before. Don't show enthusiasm because it was mocked previously. Don't relax your guard because that's when they strike. But these aren't boundaries. They're scar tissue, defensive positions around a void. You're not protecting anything. You're just trying to minimize damage to something that isn't there. Meanwhile, your real self can feel the fakeness, see the masks people wear, and detect the bullshit in seconds. I bet you can remember more than one time someone screwed you over and you blamed yourself again for not listening to your intuition. You didn't listen because good people aren't supposed to think badly of others. Systemic programming suppressed your real voice. That was your natural boundary trying to get through. Consider the energy expenditure of conscious boundary maintenance. With subjectivity, boundaries maintain themselves. Energy flows naturally. resistance happens automatically. Presence is self-sustaining. Without subjectivity, every boundary requires conscious enforcement. Every interaction needs monitoring. Every violation requires recovery. Every moment demands vigilance. You're running at 100% CPU just to exist. No wonder you're exhausted. It's like consciously pumping your heart, breathing with deliberate effort, digesting through will alone. The body would collapse in minutes. The psyche takes longer, but the result is the same. And now they sell you architectural plans. Build boundaries, they say. But that's not rebuilding. The system blocked your nose and mouth, and now it's trying to teach you how to breathe through your ass. The cruelest part is that they make you think it's your fault. You're not trying hard enough. You're resistant to healing. You have boundary issues, as if the issue is with your technique rather than the impossible nature of the task itself. Modern therapy often operates like this. Therapist says, "You need to establish better boundaries." You say, "I don't know how." Therapist says, "Let's explore why you struggle with boundaries." You say, "Because I don't know what they are." Therapist says, "That's interesting. Tell me about your childhood." 6 months later, you know everything about your childhood and nothing about boundaries. Because the conversation was never about helping you. It was about maintaining the illusion that boundaries are something you can learn rather than something that emerges from being. Imagine being taught to solve integrals without anyone explaining what an integral actually is. You memorize that the integral of x squared with respect to x equals x cubed divided by 3 plus c. You can reproduce the steps, apply the formula, get the correct answer, but when the problem shifts even slightly from the textbook example, you're paralyzed. You don't understand that an integral represents the area under a curve. You don't grasp the fundamental concept. You're just performing algorithmic rituals with symbols that have no meaning to you. This is exactly what boundary work becomes without subjectivity. You memorize the formulas. When someone does A, you say B. You practice the script. I feel na-na-na when you na-na-na, I need na-na-na. But you don't understand what you're actually calculating. What space are you measuring? What area are you protecting? You're solving equations about boundaries without understanding what boundary even means, like integrating without knowing what integration is. Every interaction leaves a trace. Look at your relational patterns. Subject patterns show clean entries and exits, sustained rhythms, natural distance regulation, effortless maintenance. Object patterns show jagged starts and stops, exhausting effort to maintain connection, constant recalculation of distance, collapse, and recovery cycles. You can see it in your text messages, the anxiety about response time. In your meetings, the careful calibration of how much to share. In your relationships, the constant monitoring of emotional temperature. You're not living, you're computing. The solution isn't better boundaries. It's recognizing that boundaries are a symptom, not a solution. They're what happens naturally when a subject exists, not something an object can construct. Instead of establishing boundaries, investigate what destroyed your subjectivity. What replaced the real you and now pretending it's how it's supposed to be? The work isn't about building walls. It's about recognizing you've been trying to be a moon without a planet, manually maintaining an orbit around nothing. The entire concept is a substitute for something more fundamental, the right to exist as a subject in your own life. The system doesn't just want your compliance, it wants to be you, and it taught you to be embarrassed by your own authentic responses. You apologize for being too much when you're actually being yourself for 5 seconds. You call yourself toxic when you feel real anger. You diagnose yourself with disorders when you resist the programming. The program wearing your face goes to therapy to learn better boundaries. Meanwhile, the real you, the one who knows this is all bullshit, gets smaller and quieter, dismissed as resistance or defensiveness or unwillingness to heal. This is why boundary work fails. You're not establishing your boundaries. You're maintaining the parasite's performance of having boundaries, while your actual self suffocates in the basement of your own psyche.